So this is the tutorial for keyboard players, how to do your green belt notation sheet. So notice at the very top that there is a practice, just like always. I want you to pay special attention to a couple of things. I'm going to teach you on a bigger screen how to draw it, but we want to make sure quarter rest is one of the hardest things to draw, but there's a few simple steps that make it easy. And then a dotted half note. When we talk about this, I really want you to pay special attention to the dot. Also notice that we are going to be working with a low so, which is a different note than what we've had before. So first, I want to talk about something that I noticed a lot of people doing when they did their orange belt, and I just want to remind you about it. If you did it, we probably already talked about it and tried to fix it, but I just kind of want to remind you so that we don't fall into those same mistakes again, because it's going to be even easier to make those mistakes. And of course, my composition is here. I'm going to start with a low do because I always start all my compositions with a low do. So I eyeballed it about down one, colored that in. Something that I've noticed some of you starting to do is your do's are touching this line. You never want that. You always want a gap in between there. If it's touching that line, it's really a ray. All right, so there you go, also called C, and we've been calling it do, but if you read regular instrumental music, you would call that a letter C. That's kind of crooked, isn't it? All right, so now, you already should know by this point how to draw re, mi, and lo, la. But I want to talk about lo, la for 1 minute, because lo, la is... people are having a tendency to do something like this. They know that it's 2 lines down, so they're drawing 1 line here and 1 line here and making a la. And while in theory, yes, you would do it 2 lines down, the problem is right now my do and my la are almost right next door to each other. And so my I is not going down and back up again. My eye is just looking straight across at it, and it makes it actually harder for me to read it. So what I really want to do is when I draw my ledger lines, which are what these little things are called if you don't remember, I want my very first one to kind of be even with the other do's. So that's where my first one is, and then my second one should be down here. So that when I draw my la on that line, now my eyeball went from here to there. It registers, hey, that's a lower note, because my eyeball had to look down to see that. So if you read letters, we call that an A. If you read solfege, you call that a la. All right, now comes the quarter rest. So this is a tricky fellow, and a quarter rest typically goes right in the middle of your staff, anywhere. It doesn't have to be real exact, but you want it to be about from there to there. Okay, it shouldn't go up above or down below. Definitely never ever hangs off the staff. So if yours is hanging off the staff, it's totally wrong. You also don't want to make them too tiny. So to make it, now, if you know your letters, then there's a couple tricks you can use. If you have a tendency to get your letters backwards, this trick might not be the best for you, but we'll do it anyway, and hopefully it can help you out. All right, so when I look at this rest, I'm almost making 2 letters on top of each other, and the first one is a letter Z, but the flap of the letter Z is just tilted up a little bit. So I have that tilted flap, and then I go over and over again. So if you see, it's like a letter Z, but the top flap is like the Z's looking up almost. Then the bottom of that Z, where I just left off, I am going to turn that into a letter C on the bottom of it. Okay, so notice my rest did not go exactly where I said my dots were, where I wanted it to go, but notice that it is still on the staff. It is not hanging off. So I'm going to try that one more time just so you can kind of follow me again. I have an open letter Z over, and then I put a C onto the bottom of it. Okay. Be careful. Some people have a tendency to do this. I'm going to show you some mistakes that are really, really common. People, usually the two most common mistakes are people make the Z part backwards or they make the C part backwards. So people will do this. And then, they know to make a letter C, but it ends up looking something like that. So if yours looks like this, you made the top part backwards. If yours, you start off with the top part the right way, but then you make the C going the wrong way, it looks like that. So if yours doesn't look zigzaggy, if yours kind of looks weird like this and like it's billowing out, then you made one of your letters backwards, either the Z part or the C part. Not sure which because I can't see your paper. All right, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, because each one of those counts as one beat only. All right, and then now, really, in real life, I could have just made a half rest because it's 2 beats of rest. Same thing, different way to draw it. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is low so, and we also want to talk about dotted half notes. So I'm going to incorporate that both in the same thing. So now a low so is also, we need to draw these same 2 lines that we drew for a la, the same 2 ledger lines. So I'm even going to kind of go over with my pencil so I can line it up right. But now, instead of drawing on the line, I hang it down like it's a little booger hanging off of that line. Hello, little booger. Oops, I shouldn't have colored that in. Sorry, guys. Okay, that's a low so. Notice that it's just a tiny bit down from where la is if I'm looking with my eyeball. My eyeball doesn't go too far down, just a little bit. Now, I want to change that into a dotted half note. So that part's pretty easy. I just make a regular half note, and then to the right of it, I put a little dot. And it does matter that it's to the right. We don't put that dot on the left unless it's upside down. We don't put that dot underneath because that means something else. It has to be just to the right. And I want you to notice that my dot is filled in. I know on the paper that I photocopied, when I made that little dot with the pen, I tried to color it in, but it almost looks hollow. So I apologize about that. That's just the way my pen was when I drew that, but it is supposed to be filled in. I also noticed when some people were trying to do their green belt that some people are making their dots super big like that. We don't want it to be a really big dot. It's not supposed to be obtrusive. It's just a little extra thing. So just a small dot right beside it. Not so tiny that it disappears, but just a small dot. So now I have my time signature is 4, so I need 4 beats, and this is a letter G if you like letters, or a low so if you use solfege. And this is worth 1, 2, 3 beats that I would hold down. 1, 2, 3. So now I need 1 more beat before I can put another bar line. And since my compositions are supposed to end in do, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to make sure that line matches up. And I only get 1 more beat, so that has to be a quarter note. I cannot pick any half note or anything like that. And then I draw my double bar line because it's the end of my composition. So on yours, just like before, copy the top part. Now that you kind of know the trick about the quarter rest, you can copy that and copy that half note low so that way you're practicing both the dotted half note and the low so. Sometimes I like to call this dotty just for fun. And then down here, copy this. Remember what we talked about with your does and going up and down, and your eyes going up and down. And then, as usual, continue on with 2 more of your own. Some of you have been skating by and I've been letting you just draw 1 extra measure, but you really need to be drawing 2 extra measures at least. And of course, follow your checklist because that's what I'll be using when I check yours. All right, have fun with green.